The debate about censorship and free speech has been waging for several years. The debate is often articulated using words such as safety, or misinformation, or disinformation, words that have just become euphemisms at this point. It reached fever pitch recently with a spate of stabbings in Sydney, one of which involved the stabbing of Bishop Mari Emanuel. This triggered the latest censorship attempt. Australia's so-called E-Safety Commissioner, popularly referred to as E-Karen, sought to censor the live-streamed footage of the attack. This reached rather ridiculous levels when E-Karen attempted to censor the footage around the entire world, not just in Australia, but everywhere. This obviously begs the question of whether any country could censor anything in any other country. Now, of course, this is rather old news at this point. However, I recently discovered an interesting exchange on ABC's Q&A program. Now, like many Australians, I don't watch ABC, much less Q&A, and I only discovered this on social media. So while this is old news, it's new news to me. The program's panel featured people like Tracy Holmes and Bridget McKenzie and Mark Speakman. Tracy Holmes, who happens to be Stan Grant's wife, she articulated what she thinks about censorship. Now, Stan Grant, you might remember, recently excoriated his own broadcaster, ABC, and argued that he faced significant racism throughout his entire career. This appeared to reach prominence when he covered the King's coronation, during which he stated that the crown represented the invasion, the theft of land, and in our case, the exterminating war. He was clearly no fan of the King, and this rather backfired on him. Now, Tracy Holmes, who is Stan Grant's wife, you might think would be well attuned to online vitriol. She, however, came out swinging against censorship. Here's what she had to say.
There is a big debate now about what goes on X and whether we should be doing more regulating of the internet. What's your view?
I don't agree with any kind of censorship in a general sense. I don't think Elon Musk is contributing to any social cohesion split inside this country. I think our media, our mainstream media, is doing enough of that. I think our politicians do enough of that. When you talk about people being able to have different perspectives and different points of views, and it's okay to have that, and yet we don't see that in politics ever.
Now, Tracy Holmes, like you would think, would probably be well aware of how the online sphere works, given what her husband has experienced. Tracy Holmes' comments, therefore, would be coming from lived experience to be using the term du jour. Now, her comments stand in stark contrast to those of Bridget McKenzie from the National Party, who it seems is in fact a big fan of censorship, at least based on her comments. Here's what Bridget McKenzie had to say.
I do back the E-Safety Commissioner's recommendation to put age verification on, violent pornography, misogynist content, and violent videos. I think our young people shouldn't be able to see that. It was one of her strong recommendations.
Now, Bridget McKenzie wants to restrict online misogynist comments. Now, exactly how that would work isn't totally clear, because it begs the question of who exactly decides what is or is not misogynistic. Does she decide? Does the government of the day decide? Does E-Karen decide? Who decides, and under what rules? That's a massive question. And if you are just going to restrict misogynistic content, then why can't you restrict other content? Where is the line drawn? She doesn't appear to have a good answer for this, which is a bit of a problem since the coalition is supposed to be more liberal, so to speak. The coalition is supposed to stand for independence and for freedom. Censorship doesn't really suit them, and it isn't a good look. Tracy Holmes articulated a much more principled position here, a much more principled position highlighting that it can in fact be the media and politicians themselves that are spreading false information. Mark Speakman, the New South Wales Liberal leader, also had a rather odd response to censorship. Mark Speakman suggested that geo-blocking of the footage was allowable, however, it should only be blocked in Australia and not elsewhere. Quite why that is the case isn't totally clear, but here's what Mark Speakman had to say.
Do you think that that footage of that attempted murder, really, that stabbing in Western Sydney should be pulled down?
Not across the world.
Why not? Why not across the world?
Well, I don't think Australia has any business in exercising takedown powers in other countries. And what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If we say we're entitled to have takedown orders apply across the world, well, then China or France or Paraguay comes back to us. We'd have to accept what they're doing as well. So I don't think it has to be worldwide. I do think, on balance, that particular video should be geo-blocked in Australia for what it's worth.
Now, let's be clear about this. Blocking footage of that attack is the thin edge of the wedge toward broader censorship. After all, for people to have any form of defense against misinformation, so to speak, they need to be able to review primary material. They need to be able to review the actual footage itself for them to be able to interpret what the media and politicians are saying. If you can't access the primary material, then how else do you vet what the media is telling you? How do you protect yourself from misinformation from the mainstream media and from politicians? They can say whatever they think, and then you have to believe it, or at least you have to accept it, because you can't verify it for yourself. Being able to verify information is hugely important to stopping this so-called misinformation scourge, which it would appear might in fact come from the media and from politicians themselves. That is, people must be able to review primary material in order to stop censorship. And if you were censoring the primary material, then that is broader censorship, because it forces people to rely on the second-hand material and forces people to rely on it without being able to verify the information for themselves. And therefore, this is intrinsic to the censorship debate. Now, this debate, of course, is ongoing. As you can see from the Q&A panel, there appear to be several views on it. However, it appears that only Pauline Hanson at this point is actually consistently advocating for free speech. The coalition appears to be a little bit all over the place. It appears to be going back and forth, trying to decide exactly what their position should be, exactly what the electorate wants, and in particular, presumably, exactly what swing seats want. Bridget McKenzie's position is a bit of a problem, because it clearly gives rise to potential future additional censorship. Now, I don't necessarily agree with or necessarily know all of Pauline Hanson's policies. I'm not clear, for example, on what her exact fiscal policies are, because they aren't very clear from the One Nation website. And I would never support a party that wants to increase taxation. And I'm not sure where One Nation stands on that. But at present, only One Nation has consistently and coherently advocated for free speech. The other parties appear to want more censorship. The Labour Party appears to actually want more power for E. Karen to go and censor yet more information, presumably to censor the detractors of the government, to allow the government, the ALP, to spread misinformation themselves. The coalition seems to be trying to judge what the electorate wants without coming up with its own position at this point. Only One Nation appears to, at this point, have a consistent position on this. Now, this, like I said, is not to say that One Nation necessarily is correct on everything, but at least they are correct on this. Because without free speech, the government's own misinformation will prevail, and we'll just have the government pulling the wool over our eyes, ever more and more.